Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Dear friends and supporters of Khanversation, welcome to our next episode of Khanversation. This is the first of Khanversations about the Quran, Ramadan 2021. Some of you have benefited from Ramadan 2020, and now I'm happy and I feel blessed that I'm able to continue with Khanversations about the Quran in this month too. I want to first congratulate all of you for being fortunate enough to see another month of Ramadan. I hope and pray that all of us can benefit not just from fasting and doing ibadah and doing zikr and doing charities, but also increasing our appreciation and understanding of the Quran. Today, we are very fortunate to have with us a very distinguished teacher and translator and scholar of the Quran, and I will be introducing him shortly. But before that, let me also thank all of you who actually support the Khanversations. I also want to thank the Islamic Community Center of Lancaster, which will be co-hosting this series during the month of Ramadan. And I also want to invite you to like the channel, to like the episodes, and also not only subscribe to it, but share it with all your friends and family. Assalamu alaikum, Dr. Musharraf Hussain. Welcome to Khanversation.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Professor Muqtedar, it's really a great honor and a privilege to be with you.
I want to start every conversation in this season of Khanversations about the Quran by reciting one ayah of the Quran. And the ayah that I have chosen for this episode are actually two ayahs, the 190th and the 191st ayah of Surah Al-Imran. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إن في خلق السماوات والأرض واختلاف الليل والنهار لآيات لأولي الألباب الذين يذكرون الله قياما وقعودا وعلى جنوبهم ويتفكرون في خلق السماوات والأرض ربنا ما خلقت هذا باطلا Subhanak faqina azab an-nar. We will talk about the meaning and why I have selected this ayah later on. But first, let me tell you a little bit about our distinguished author, scholar. This is the fantastic translation of the Quran, the Majestic Quran that he has produced over several years. It's not only very accessible in its translation and its content, but it's also very beautifully produced. It has both the Arabic and the English text, but there are some very special qualities about the English translation that we will talk to Dr. Musharraf Hussain. Dr. Musharraf Hussain has two avatars. In his first avatar, he was a scientist, so he did a lot of fikr. And then in his second avatar, he is doing zikr and about zikr. So that is why you can understand why I chose the ayah that I chose. He is at the moment the chief executive of Karimia Institute in Nottingham. He's also the chief editor and contributor of the monthly magazine, The Invitation. He's trustee of Muslim Hands. He is also a recipient of OBE, Order of the British Empire, in 2009. And mashallah, which means that in the work of deen, he is obviously a stalwart, but also in matters of dunya, he is recognized by his community and his country. So without much ado, welcome Dr. Musharraf Hussain, and I want to straight away ask you right away, why do we need another translation of the Quran?
A very good question. Well, languages change, and English language is actually evolving rapidly. And so we have some very popular Quran translations and good translations in terms of their accuracy. But let's be honest, who now speaks Shakespeare's thee, thou language? And also, Picto's translation, our great and wonderful literary master, Abdullah Yusuf Ali. Let's be honest, these were great translators. I have a great admiration for them. In nearly 30 odd years or 40 years, I think I've been reading their translations. But English has now changed so much that, there's a need for a contemporary 21st century English. But not only that, culture has changed. The other thing, very important one, is the style. Language style has changed, and also the presentation has changed. Now, we live in a very, just look at your textbooks in schools, colleges, and universities. We are used to that way of reading. And if you present it in any other way, to be honest, our new generation will find it alien and they will be put off, and they are. And this was the sad situation I was seeing all around me, that when you talk about Quran translation, and people see those old translations, old language, old style of presentation and everything, they look at it for about 15 seconds and put it away. So there was a dire need to be able to use modern style, not just contemporary plain English, but also the style of presenting it. And what I mean there is very simply that, the Quran is very thematic, and it has very beautiful short stories. It has pithy proverbs. It has very pithy narratives. They must be, separated. That's what, otherwise people will miss them. People won't understand it. So there was a real need of a translation that actually sort of reflects our literary world, the world that our children from the age of 4 or 5 start opening up and reading, from Harry Potter to whatever they're reading. I think it's really important to remember that.
You're being very modest, sir. If you notice, I don't know whether you're familiar with Muhammad Asad's translation.
Oh, I am. I love his notes. I'm not too fond of his translation, but I really like his notes.
Yeah, some people say that.
And I read his book, Islam at Crossroad, nearly 40 odd years ago. So I'm a great fan of his writing as well. He's really, and his Road to Makkah is amazing.
Yeah. People say that he is influenced a lot by Mu'tazila thinking and Zamakhshari's linguistic things. But he did make a point that, which is the exact opposite of what you're saying. You're talking about how English has changed, but so has the way we speak and study and teach Arabic language, right? So for example, I went and studied Arabic in Morocco. And so once I get outside the institute, I could not understand what people were talking. And when I would speak in the bazaar, they would think I was a Saudi or something like that. So even the way we teach the language, especially the Fusha, very few people do, unless you travel really to some countries, you won't get access to Fusha. So I think you're being modest in suggesting that people like Pechtal and Yusuf Ali and others, we really don't know how good their Arabic really was, right? And their understanding of the Arabic language while they were translating it. But I must also say that you have snuck in a lot of commentary in this translation. So, for example, if you look on the right side where you have Arabic text, you have tiny paragraphs, which are they are like summaries, or are they commentaries? What are they?
Yeah, that little nugget in the margin, Professor Muqtedar, is really what I gleaned when I was reading that page. What hit me, actually, and you will notice most of them, I've put a question at the end of it as well, or turned it into a question. And I think, I saw the Quran speaking, and that is what I'm trying to do throughout my I want people to actually listen to the Quran, let the Quran speak to them, and just listen. I mean, I think this is something which we don't do, sadly. We get bogged down with the with tilawat, and tilawat is a partial reading. Let me be honest. I mean that when I say that tilawat is partial reading, what I mean by that is, the Quran says, "Alladhina ataynahumul kitaba yatlunahu haqqa tilawati." Those to whom we have given this book, read it as it ought to be read. Now, what I mean by partial, so we read in Arabic, particularly the non-Arabs, we just read Arabic, sometimes obviously correctly in beautiful pronunciation, sometimes wrong as well, or a lot of the time, actually, a lot of people do poor pronunciation. Anyway, but what I mean by partial reading is, well, if you don't understand what you're reading, what is that? That's a partial reading. That is not whole reading. You're just being a parrot. And I think, that is not allowed, I think, in a modern, certainly in the West, where we have nearly 100% literacy. Every young Muslim is now a good reader of English, to a level which we've tried it with 8-9-year-olds, our Quran translation. I've tried it with many, an average 8-9-year-old children can read it, understand the narrative. Yes. So I think it's really imperative that we give up that notion that we should be just doing tilawat. We should also read.
I understand that, but there is also this paradox about the Quran, where the Quran itself says it is easy to understand. Whereas the moment I start articulating my opinion based on my understanding of the Quran, then people jump on me saying that, well, you can't understand it until you have spent 20 years studying Arabic language, until you have spent reading all the tafasis, and you have learned about the naskh and mansukh and all of the ulum al-Quran, all the various caveats. And suddenly we find that it is an impossible text to really understand. So from your perspective, I don't think translation is possible without understanding. So what is your view on this paradox?
Well, no, it's not a paradox, actually. What it is that the scholar's job, it is not the job of every Muslim to learn Arabic language, the sarf and nah, to learn the ilm al-ma'ani and ilm al-bayan, the rhetorics of it, and then the style of Arabic language, and then learn all the usul. No way. No, that is not at all. That is fardul ain. Sorry, fardul kifaya. Okay, we need a handful of, we need few thousand, we need, this is a communal responsibility of the scholars. Okay, so that is for a scholar. For ordinary people, it is imperative they read it in their own language. The Quran says, وَمَا أَرْسَلْنَا مِن رَسُولٍ إِلَّا بِلِسَانِ قَوْمِهِ لِيُبَيِّنَ لَهُم. It's very clear. We, whichever community we sent a messenger to, he spoke their language. He knew their culture. He knew how to, and what style to use, what slangs to use, so that nobody has an excuse not to understand. And when we look at, the Arabic of the time of the 1400 years ago, it's really, they found it, they could understand it, and it used that style. So, the style of mahzuf, for example, the hazaf or the ellipsis is so common. That was quite a natural and normal way of speaking, in that society. Yet today you don't do that. But so, the Quran came to reflect the way people spoke, their culture. And today, the translator and the scholar's job is this. It's not people's job. No, this is the job of scholars to translate it and present it. So it's our job, really, to give our people and then say to them, now listen to the Quran, really. So it's not a paradox. I see it as two different roles. You have that responsibility, Professor Muqtedar. Professor Sayyid Hussain Nasr has it. Professor Lumbad has it. My great teacher, Aminul Hasanat Shah Sahab, has this responsibility to learn and to present it to us. Our job is to present, and then people have to really be given that. They should expect it from us.
My first reaction to the Quran as I grew older was that Quran has been revealed to me directly. This is God's communication to me. And therefore, I shall act upon what I understand from the Quran and not as mediated by X, Y, Z, etc. And not many people subscribe to that idea. They're very afraid of letting less knowledgeable people or less pious people or people with whom they have interpretive, ideological, madahib differences to interpret. But our young people who are growing up in the West, they are self-confident about their understanding, their education, their intelligence, and they are willing to draw their own conclusions after reading the Quran. And even if they don't know Arabic, they don't hesitate to reach conclusions. So in that sense, I think that your translation is going to actually empower the youth, right, to feel more confident about their understanding. So it's been out for more than a year now. Have you had any experiences, at least in UK, about how the youth are responding to this translation?
I've had an amazing sort of response from my readers. Almost every week, mashallah, we get amazing sort of emails and letters, and people really are, some of them say, I've got so many translations, but it's first time I can really understand what Allah is saying to me. So yes, we're getting that amazing response. People really feel they can understand the Quran. There is that enabling and empowerment, they feel, mashallah. So I'm really chuffed about that and humbled at the same time, that yes, mashallah, it's, people are benefiting from it in that way. And I think, coming back to this idea, you started, is the Quran easy to understand? Of course it is. But let's be honest, it's got some very deep ideas and thoughts in it. And I think what our scholarship has done over the last 1400 years is made the job very easy for a translator in the 21st century, actually. We've got, and this is the beauty of it, I think. And, you asked about, we need to be standardized, okay? I know we don't believe in sort of that this is orthodox and non-orthodox, but there is, of course, there is this sense that we are actually steeped in amazing understanding of the Quran. And I am somebody who actually, although I trained as a scientist and therefore I'm very curious and also rebellious in that sense, but no, I am, when it comes to the deen, I want to stay really in the middle. I adopt the middle path and the what is almost sort of consensual, where there is consensus, where there is agreement. Wherever there are differences, I don't think we want to bring those things in for the awam nas. I think people don't need to be involved in that, and rightly so.
So you played it safe. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, I think that's right. Yeah, and this is why I went to Darul Ifta of Egypt to get my endorsement. I went to many scholars to make sure that people are happy. And I myself, I know that the Quran, it does have certain differences. That there are differences, but why are you going to upset people and not go along the standard way? Really, I can't actually. So that is why I've played it safe, and I've gone along the route that I want millions of Muslims to benefit. Okay, I don't want people to be wasting time on minutiae and the details. We've got, the Quran is really about transforming the individual, making us kind, loving, thoughtful people. And that is what, I want people to be focusing on, really.
That is what we mean by reading being a transformative experience, isn't it?
Yes.
That if you read the Quran, if you read the Ayah of the Quran, if you reflect on it for a minute or two, you come out of it a better person. And if it is not, then it is not.
And as you said, you said that you feel Allah is speaking to me. And that's really important, that I'm trying to always say, that, you should always feel engaged. You should feel that you are listening to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaking to you. This is, after all, it is kalamullah. All right, this is the kalamullah. This is Allah's speech. So yes,
you just said that we shouldn't focus on minutiae, but so forgive me, I want to focus on minutiae for a couple of minutes with two questions, really. First of all, I want to say something very interesting. Your subheadings are very, very helpful for reading. I find them very helpful, and I did not check whether the subheadings are indexed, but if the subheadings alone are indexed and people who are preparing, say, for an interfaith dialogue or preparing a khutbah, they can go back just to the index and pick up the
That's very
things.
good, inshallah. It's something we will
Yeah,
do.
yeah, and especially since you have an electronic version of it, it might be easier to do it, right? So I thought that would be great. Sometimes what happens, I have brothers calling me and saying, "Oh, brother Muqtedar, I have to go to a synagogue to give a talk on this. I have to go to church. Can you help me?" And if I'm driving or I'm in a class, then. But now I can say, just pick the Majestic Quran, look at the index, and it will be very helpful to you. Especially for people who are lay brothers who are engaged in dawah and other activities. However, I spent a lot of time. I wrote a book called on Ihsan. I don't know whether you saw this, but I will send a copy to you. I will. I will after the interview. I'll take your address and send you a copy. So in that, I took one ayah and I looked at nearly every possible commentator I could find as to how they understood this particular ayah. And this ayah is in Surah Al-Nisa, ayah number 125. The ayah says, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, وَمَنْ أَحْسَنُ دِينًا مِمَّنْ أَسْلَمَ وَجْهَهُ لِلَّهِ وَهُوَ مُحْسِنٌ وَأَتَّبَعَ مِلَّةَ إِبْرَاهِيمَ حَنِيفًا. So I want to kind of nitpick your translation of this ayah. And you say, this is on page 184 of your volume, who is better in terms of religion than the one who surrenders himself completely to Allah, performs good works, and out of a natural inclination follows Ibrahim's way of worshipping. Allah took Ibrahim as a close friend. That's the next ayah. So when I was reading this, there are a couple of things that I want to ask. So for example, if you had the word amal salihin, how would you translate that? As good works, isn't it? Or good deeds?
Yes.
And then why would you also translate muhsin as someone who does good deeds? Is there a difference between things which are done by a muhsin and things which are just plain good deeds?
Okay. The muhsin is, I think the amalus salihat is the good deeds, and the muhsin is really to do with doing ihsan, to be honest, which is
exactly
benefiting others. It's about benefiting others, whereas amalus salihat is about me. It's the good deeds come to me, I get rewarded for them, I get the psychological buzz from it, I get the benefit, my heart gets it, my mind gets it, and others might get, okay? But muhsin is somebody who intentionally is doing a favor to others. And I think, this is where the poverty of language...
I agree.
Poverty of language. And also, I'll tell you something. I fell in love with the Quran at the age of 8 when I started memorizing it. And so I'm, for all this life, nearly 50 odd years, I have been reading Quran translations. So, those Pickthall and Abdullah Yusuf Ali's and Daud's as well. And for the last 10 years, Abdul Halim's, they are embedded in my head. So sometimes it's really so difficult to get out of that. Yeah. It really is a challenge, to be honest, sometimes to overlook that. And that's a real challenge. So I think we have to rethink and use a better vocabulary and look for new words.
So, all English translators translated Ihsan and Muhsin as doing good deeds and one who does good works or good deeds. But, it was very interesting. Ibn Kathir basically says, because this word Muhsin needs to be explained rather than what is Ihsan here. And Muhsin, he explained Muhsin as one who follows the Sharia. And my reaction was, it's like saying, who is a PhD? And then you say, PhD is one who has passed high school. Of course, someone who has graduated from high school is a PhD also. You can't get there. But getting to a PhD is a lot more than just graduating from high school. And I think sometimes in this particular case, so for example, let me read to you what Ibn Arabi said about this ayah. It was, to me, it just blew up. He had the shortest commentary on this ayah, and he says, Mustafan fi ahwaluhu bil baha ba'd al fana. So you can understand, this is all heavily embedded in the language and philosophy of tasawwuf. So what he says is that a muhsin is one who is in a state of ihsan, and the state of ihsan is one where you have completely self-annihilated into God, and now you remain in Allah. So I was wondering, I mean, the reason why I'm picking it because I spent like several months just looking at the tafsirs of this ayah and this is the truth. So I was wondering that some words should not be translated. That's the point I'm trying to make. So for example, if I would to translate, I'm nowhere qualified to translate the Quran. Your Arabic, your English, and knowledge of this, mashallah, is much more superior. But I would have translated this as saying, one who surrenders himself completely to Allah while he's in a state of ihsan. While
Okay, I would disagree there, Professor Muqtedar, because I think, I believe in making English our language, inshallah, language of Islam. I think, it's going to be, inshallah, and it's rich enough. English is a very, very rich language. And
yeah.
I think this is where it's my shortcomings and translators' shortcomings, not being able to find those. And this is where I think what the alternative is, use footnotes. So I think we need to be using more footnotes to clarify these words, or a glossary. So I'm not too keen on not translating, because that would not be right, because
you did you did use a footnote for Hanif, which is
that's right. Yes,
ayah.
I don't think I've explained Mohsin anywhere. So this is something, inshallah. I'm constantly revising. So we're going to be publishing our 4th edition and adding more footnotes. And I believe in that footnotes. Professor Muqtedar, you said about the sections that there's 1,500 sections. There's a story behind sections. It's very sad that very few people know this. In the Indo-Pak Musharraf, the one we publish in India and Pakistan and Bangladesh, they have a sectioning in the margins called ruku.
Ruku, yeah, I know.
You know what rukus are? They are thematic divisions.
Yeah, I know.
They were done by a group of scholars back in the 18th century. And they did it in order to help their young Hufaz who didn't know Arabic to be able to, they will tell them, okay, look, this is the theme. In Surah Baqarah, for example,
the 16 rukus, for example.
In Surah Baqarah, the first ruku ends at Adhabun Alim. Up to here is the description of a true believer, and the opposite.
Actually, the book is laid out very beautifully. So you have 2 or 3 themes per page on the English translation side. Yeah. And I don't know whether you know that, but Imam Ghazali, the director of Al-Azhar University, he also advocated for a thematic tafsir of the Quran.
I'm very fond of his the thematic commentary. It's beautiful.
And I think Maududi also was very thematic in his approach to the Quran and his commentary.
Yeah, I think a lot of modern... because, I think one of the reasons is because they were educated
in the modern sense.
Textbooks that believe... What modern way of writing textbooks is a very unique, literal, sort of linear way of writing, whereas, what's very special about the Quran and some of the old books is they have a ring structure. Masnavi of Rumi and the Old Testament, they have been shown to have this sort of circular rather than the linear, which we are used to in our writing nowadays. So I'm not surprised, that a lot of modern scholars who went to schools, colleges, and universities will be thinking in this way.
At the risk of looking as if I'm beating a dead horse, in that same ayah, there is this concept of aslama wajhahu lillahi, of submitting one's face to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That is such a profound concept, isn't it? It is not, the word aslama itself means submitting to Allah, submitting to Allah's will. So if you just had aslama, you would say, oh, he has submitted and submitted to God. That is where the word Islam also comes from. However, I'm still struggling to understand fully. The best way in which I understand that conceptually is to submit your identity itself, right? Submit your identity to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That everything about who you are is infused and constituted by your submission to Allah. So in order to make it accessible to people, are we losing some of the profound depth and richness of the Quran?
Of course. The translation is really one facet of it. And there are many, aslama wajahu, you could take as an idiom as well,
Yeah.
where you surrender your identity, your reality to God. And there are many metaphors, many metonyms, and you can only translate one facet of it. And that's where good footnotes should be able to, tell the other part of the story as well. I think that's a limitation, this limitation of translations, of course. But it is very important, and it is really something we need to be. I think we need to really start emphasizing the importance of reading translations now. I would, to be honest, go as far as saying it's more important than even reading, than doing the tilawat. Why? Because, we live in an age of reason. Our young people are always asking why, how, and why should I, And the Quran is so powerful in answering those questions. It is convincing. And you cannot convince people by just reading it in Arabic parrot fashion. They won't. So that is why it is so important for us to be able to present, the Quran in terse and in a way that really does make sense, as full sense as possible. And we can't do that. I know we're limited, but we can try our best.
But I think the beauty of your translation is that for any thinking person, especially if they were following your thematic subheadings, I think your subheadings are very clever, very thoughtful, and they will hook the person in. And so I'm sure that most teenage Muslims who are curious will explore further and beyond. I also want to look at one more ayah before I have other broader questions. This is 548, and you can understand this ayah by itself is a minefield. It's on page 218 in your volume. And the part of the ayah that I want to discuss, obviously, is the part where it is probably the last section in the Arabic part, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Look, لِكُلِّ جَعَلْنَا مِنْكُمْ شِرْعًا وَمِنْهَاجًا. And you translate that to every community in the past, we gave a specific law and a way of life. We can debate about whether minhaj is a way of life or whether minhaj is an epistemology of understanding, interpreting the Quran. But I'm very curious as to why I feel, if I were to translate this, I would say, لِكُلِّ جَعَلْنَا مِنْكُمْ شِرْعًا وَمِنْهَاجًا. To each one, we have given a sharia and a method. We have given a law and a method. But in the past part is very loaded, right? Especially given your subheading, which says religious differences are by Allah's will, which assumes that contemporary religious differences are by Allah's will. But here the translation throws it into the past. So, like, for example, if I were to say that diversity of religion is divinely ordained, but you're saying not in the present, in the past. I mean, is that... do you see the point that I'm trying to make? You're trying to say that it is not valid anymore.
No. I think that's it's timeless. The idea that diversity, that diversity is timeless in the whole nature, in the whole universe. We see diversity, and the diversity of religions is also something that's been there and still is to this very day. So I'm not really quite sure how you come to that, but
So, for example, if you read the tafasis of this ayah, people try to say that after the revelation of the Quran and of the advent of Prophet Muhammad, this has been abrogated. So, if you were a Christian or a Jew, before it was acceptable, but now there is no diversity, nobody will be accepted. There is salvation for nobody unless you are a Muslim. In fact, there is not a salvation for you, even if you believed in one God. You have to believe in Prophet Muhammad also as messenger of Allah, or you're going straight through the green channel to hell. No, nothing like that. That is the standard orthodox position, which comes from most ulama. Whereas they struggle to then deal with 548 and they use
Yeah.
abrogation
Well,
techniques to silence that side of the Quran. So that little phrase saying that in the past, because it is not there in the text, right? Even though the verb jalna itself is a past tense word, but when instead of saying
oh, I see. I
we,
see. Okay.
do you see what I mean?
All right. All right. I think, uh, in the past should have been in italics, and italics are the mahzufat, the ellipses. So you notice, Professor Muqtedar,
Yes,
I've
you
got
have
lots
a
of
lot.
the italics are really the mahzufat, are my additions to help the reader understand. And so in the past should have been actually in italics, but I can understand your criticism of that, which is very valid. That the Quran is not actually saying that, and I say this is yes.
But I want to come back to this discussion we had about reading. I want to ask about the utility of of uh, of Tarawih. So I look at all of our community members in the U.S. and it is the biggest activity at the masjid. Like, we are gearing up for that. A lot for a smaller masajid, that is their biggest budget, importing an imam from India, Pakistan, or Egypt. And then if the community is very diverse, the Arab congregants don't like the Desi recitation, and Desis are very worried about some of the Arabic approach. And so trying to find a Hafiz which will appeal to everybody, and 3 to 4 hours are taken over in the evening. Everybody is working from morning till evening. There's nothing else happening in Ramadan. I mean, the Tarawih colonizes the whole of the day. And there are so many traditions which say that one hour of contemplation, 1 hour of tafakkur is better than all night of ibadah. so, so is there any leeway that we teach our young people the true meaning of the Quran? Sit there and even having a half an hour discussion on one ayah, I think to me is probably much more beneficial in increasing the iman and understanding than people just standing there half asleep, worried whether your wudu is still valid. you know.
Well, first of all, this year we have at our Krimiya's mosques, we have instituted that the Isha prayer will only be 1 hour long, and the Hufaz will have to finish everything with, from Salah to the last Witr Jamaat. It has to be all done within 1 hour. So we're not letting them go beyond that. Secondly, I have, mashallah, prepared a summary of each juz. We publish that and it's now available. So we have which takes about 6-7 minutes to read, about 1,200 words for each juz. I've done a summary, and I'm hoping, this will sort of whet people's appetite to read the whole juz. Now, Professor Muqtedar, it takes only about 20 to 25 minutes to read one juz, the translation. So it's not a long time. And I say I've summarized it into 6-7 minutes as well, shorter version, summary of it as well. So, but Abid, I'll tell you, all my life, I've been teaching the Quran. And I really regret this. What we've done is we have actually conditioned people. We've conditioned our children to read, just read, recite. No understanding, sadly. Even my Hufaz, we've got hundreds of Hufaz in our institute, who've done Hifz. And it is really sad, that we have conditioned. I'm using this word conditioned, and I mean it. We have conditioned them to just read like parrot. And they do it, they're obeying that. And now I'm trying to undo that. And it's really so difficult to say to people, oh, come on, yaar, read the translation. What does it mean to you? What is it? Come on. So I think now we've instituted in our institute, when children are learning to read the Quran, they have to read translation with it. So they get into this habit from early on that this book is full of meanings. It is a life changer. You should read these stories. You should love these stories. You should really identify with Ibrahim, with with Ayub alayhi salam and his patience and Yusuf alayhi salam. We need to really do that.
I think that Muslims have taken a reverence to such a point that they don't recognize that not understanding, not reading the Quran, just putting it up on the highest spot in your house is actually disrespectful to the word of Allah. It's like God is speaking to you constantly and you're simply refusing to listen to him, right? By not reading it and not understanding it. So do you think there is a need for a very profound rethinking of how we think about the Quran?
Oh, absolutely. That very famous poem by Mahirul Qadri about, you speak Urdu as well, don't you?
Yeah.
Do you know what I'm referring to? That very famous poem of Mahirul Qadri where he says, मुझे ताकों पर सजाया जाता है, इतर लगाया जाता है, गलाफों में मुझे, I can't, it's amazing. And that's really what he's saying is that, people keep me remote,
Yeah.
And as you said, this is not reverence, really, to be honest. This is not reverence. It is the very opposite of it. The Quran demands that you should be thinking, you should be understanding, you should be reflecting, you should be pondering on me, and you should be gaining the meanings, So that is really, and it's a very important, and I think we're just right, now that in the West, we have almost 100%, our, mashallah, congregations are literate. Therefore, we're in a very good position to be encouraging them. And the other thing is, I think, we've lost a lot of authority, or certainly the imams and the religious institutions haven't got that authority now. But this book does, and young people do give it that. So I think it's going to be natural that people will be coming to the Quran.
One of the things, I approach our deen and everything from a very critical perspective, and I've realized that the only really substantive thing we have as Muslims is the Quran, and everything is around it, which can be very critical. And I find it very troublesome as to how little of the space it occupies, even in our religious discourse. If you have noticed, we are more obsessed about Aqidah and Sharia and what is halal and what is haram and stuff like this. Some of the things are often very trivial. Then even worrying about what Allah Subhanahu wa Taala says in the Quran as to
Why?
I think because the teachers are illiterate about the Quran.
I think there's two reasons why it's like that. One is we think that we have actually distilled all the laws of this, all the ahkams, into our wonderful fiqh. So fiqh is the ultimate, and yet it is only about 300 verses, which is about 5%, less than 5%. Okay,
yes.
So we're very proud of that. And our Aqidah, we've got it down into Aqaid Nasafi or Tahawi, or the Asharis have covered it, and the stories of Tasawwuf are in our books of Tasawwuf. I think that's one reason where we feel, well, I know all the fiqh, I know all the Aqaid, I know the 63 points of the Aqaid Nasafi, I know them. I know the Tasawwufs, the meanings of Tawakkul and Ihsan and Taslim and Rida. I know. So I know I've distilled the Quran, I know it. I think that's one problem, possibly. The other is very simply this, I think, that we haven't trusted translations. And I think now is the time that we need to say, no, what is the problem? What is your problem with translations? Identify those problems, where they are, and let's agree on what is the agreed point of view. And there is, of course, we know that, there is actually very little of, discrepancies, to be honest, in that sense. There are very little and very few, and we can agree. So really, it's about having that trust now in translations, and also admitting. You see, this is the other thing. A lot of these scholars, sadly, they go to the Darul Uloom for 8-9 years, and I know most of them will not be able to understand the Quran directly in Arabic. it takes a lot of time, for you to use your sarf and nav. And if you were to then go to the ilm al-ma'ani and the ilm al-bayan to look up whether it is a metaphor or a metonym, and what is the style, how does the syntax work here? It's just not, it's just not possible. So,
yeah.
And you do need to, translations are so important. I think really we have to be humble now and say, I rely on translation. I need a translation. And in order to communicate and to listen to Allah, actually to receive the divine revelation, I need to have it in translation form. So I think there's those 2 points.
So it's not just the translation. When I was reading, like there is a very, the Quran.com is a very helpful website with several translations. And I think you should also have your translation to go with them. I also find there's a website called tafsir.com, which has a lot of tafsir, especially if you can read Arabic. They're pretty comprehensive. I think the best collection of all tafsirs. But something I found very interesting, and when I was reading some of the commentators, some of them, or a lot of them, or most of them seem to have this arrogant position that I have now understood the Quran and let me explain it to you. Yeah. And to me, that was constantly, it didn't matter who I was reading, whether I was reading Ibn Kathir or reading even Al-Tabari and others. But there seems to be this position that, okay, I got it now. Let me tell you what it really means. And I think that we need to be, I think, more humble about the Quran. If all the trees on the planet were pens and all the oceans and rivers were inks, we would still not run out. We would still be short of talking about what God means and what God is. So I have a feeling that there has to be a mental change towards the Quran. We should approach the Quran to discover God, not discover law or try to use it to win arguments or so it's not an instrument. It's a doorway to heavens. The other day after Mirad, I was saying that each one of us should find a burah for ourselves, which will take us closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And I think that your translation is your burah, mashallah. It has taken you so many darajat ahead of most of us. But I think that do you think that Muslims in the West who alhamdulillah are so privileged, not just in terms of education, but also in terms of intellectual freedoms that are available to them to question, to do work, do you think that a revolution about a Muslim understanding and approach to Quran can be, something that can come out of the West? Can the sun rise in the West, so to speak?
I certainly believe that we have now, this amazing pool of literate young Muslims, very keen to learn their deen. Our job is really to provide the best translations, good explanations, and tafasir, and also allow them, yes, to actually begin to see those mysteries as well. As you said, the Quran is actually unfathomable. Let me share with you, in Surah Al-Hadid, the Quran talks about وَأَنزَلْنَا الْحَدِيدَ, and we sent down the iron. Now, this is really interesting. My own teacher, wonderful, teacher, and his great mufassir, Pir Muhammad Karam Shah Rahmatullah al-Azri, he translated the Quran in his tafsir of 5 volumes called Ziyaul Quran. In the translation, he says, and we created the iron. And in fact, that is what most mufassirin translated Anzalna as. I said, my goodness, Anzalna is to come from up there down. Anzalna is about coming down. The rain comes down, the vash comes down. So where is you see, it's only 60 years ago that they discovered that, the iron comes from the stars. It's a stardust, just like all the other elements on Earth. All the elements on Earth, 100 plus, are really from the stardust. This is, yes, they did come down. And you wonder, well, the Quran could have said, khalaqna al-hadid, ja'alna al-hadid. There are several other words it could have actually used for creation, but it didn't. It went for this amazing word. We sent down. And so only 60 years ago, this was discovered. This whole idea about the expanding universe.
Exactly, that is what I was trying to say.
Is another verse where Allah says, وَإِنَّا لَمُوسِعُونَ. We are expanding it.
Expanding the universe,
making it wasi', which simply means, we're expanding it. Yes. So I think, the Quran, alhamdulillah, is full of mysteries, yes, for us to...
But you, sorry to interrupt you, but you actually made a very interesting point. You're not just saying that we can still discover meaning in the Quran, but what you're also saying that our current understanding is still contingent.
Yes, of course.
And that is an important part to do, especially when you take it and then make laws, right? So yes. to be humble about the fact that at the moment, this is how we understand it, and not to say this is what it means.
Yes.
It's like to say at the moment, this is how we understand it.
And same thing in, human sciences, and particularly in psychology. Some of the amazing, discoveries about human psychology, human attitude, and human character. Oh, it's just amazing, the way the Quran presents that, to be honest. So, when you read Fakhruddin Razi's Tafsir Kabir Mafatihul Ghaib, you sometimes, obviously, I laugh at a lot of the things he writes because they're actually Greek science, which is now obsolete, and it is laughable. But it was so what is he
geography and geometry,
so he's actually using the science of his own time to understand the Quran, and I think that's what is a challenge for us now, and we should be. There's what I would love to see is a tafsir in which I can use humanities, human sciences. I can use management sciences. I can use business studies to help me to unpack the deep meanings of some verses, and that is really something wonderful. And I hope, inshallah, to use physics, to use chemistry, to use astrophysics to explain some of the beautiful, phrases and ideas that the Quran presents. I think that's something which we need to be encouraging and to use. And I don't think we'll be doing anything that is out of place, to be honest. That would be, and that is what is demanded, I believe, that in my time, I am responsible for, my age and my people, and people have expectations that I should be able to present the Quran in modern context, using modern examples, not, Tabri's and not Qurtubi's, not. Well, yes, you need to some of, sometimes you need to use some of those. But to be honest, contemporary science, contemporary humanities offers us so much rich material to enrich and unpack Quranic phrases, Quranic ideas, and Quranic thoughts, really.
Since I started doing these conversations about the Quran, I'm looking at people's work from a different perspective. Rather than just learning about the Quran, I'm looking at how they did it and why they did it and how much work they put in. And that hadith, which is very famous, خَيْرُكُمْ مَنْ تَعَلَّمَ الْقُرْآنَ وَعَلَّمَهُ. The best of you are those who study the Quran and teach it, begins to have much more meaning to me. And I'm really very envious of scholars like you who have had the opportunity to do such phenomenal work. And I really want to thank you for the fantastic job that you have done with this Quran. I'm sure not just young Muslim, but scholars, Muslim scholars, not Muslim scholars, who are trying to understand the Quran today will benefit from this incredibly. So what's next for you?
Well, I said to you, I fell in love with the Quran at the age of 8. I'm now in my 60s, and I think I'm very lucky, mashallah. Allah has given me an amazing opportunity. I'm very humbled as well by this. So I'm now focusing, I want to flood the world with the Quran. I want to bless, and I want to make people, have this Quran. So we've now produced a paperback without the Arabic, just English, so it can be used. And you should, I'm saying to people, put it on your coffee table all the time. You can read it without wudu. Okay, don't be scared. Yeah. It's on Kindle. We've got an app of it, alhamdulillah. We have I'm going to be producing a children's version. We're doing children's story based on the Quran. in a way that is, inshallah, going to be very appealing to small, 7 to 12-year-old children. So there's a lot to do, to be honest. And I'm doing a Quran course, which will be published very soon as well. So people can really engage with it. We need to learn how to experience the Quran, to be honest. That is the real crux of it. Experience. And that is, I think, same as mushahada. In the books, mushahada. Mushahada is this experiencing. And until you actually experience the Quran, and what I mean by experience is that it hits you, and your eyes flow with tears. You feel close to God. You have fear, you have love, and you want to get up and do something good as well. That experience, will come, through reading the translation and understanding it and letting your heart be touched by it, inshallah.
And it's like saying, move from ilm al-yaqeen to haqq al-yaqeen. I just don't read it, but experience the reality of the Quran. It is so beautiful. And I hope that in this month of Ramadan, people will actually experience the Quran in a very personal way, which will make them spiritually richer. And I hope that, and we all will pray for people like you who have made the Quran accessible. I'm buying a copy each for every kid of mine and for every family member, because I would love them all to have this. It is very well done, mashallah. So thank you very much, and congratulations to you and your family, and Jazakallah khair.
Thank you very much, Professor Muqtedar. Thank you.